Everybody thinks about bugging out, but what are you going to do if you have to bug in? Let's talk about some of your options. Hi guys, it's Ryan here with Sigma Survival, and in this video I'm going to be talking about how you can better prepare for a situation where you have to stay at home, fortify your home, and you have to bug in. Okay, this is a situation that I don't really see talked about all too often, but it's definitely a factor. We've all just lived through the COVID-19 lockdowns, multiple lockdowns for most of us. Depending on where you were in the world, it might have been really militarised and strict, or it could have been just kind of like self-policing. There was a lot to have been learnt from that. But we're looking more at like a life-threatening disaster, infrastructural collapse, EMP strikes, natural disasters, this sort of thing. So if you have to stay at home, I'm going to break this down into what you should do within the first 10 minutes, what you should do within the first hour, and what you should do over the next 72 hours. So, and then maybe beyond that. So let's get into the first 10 minutes. Okay guys, so there's been some kind of emergency alert, something's going on, and the best port of call is not to bug out, but it's to bug in. What are you going to do? First thing I would say to do is fill the bathtub, put a plug in it, make sure you've got a plug to start with, fill the bathtub full of water. The average bathtub can fill to roughly around about 130 litres of water. So this is definitely a good amount of water. I would recommend filling most of your sinks as well, and then any containers thereafter, as many as possible, because this is going to be your lifeline. Do you really want to be later on down the line queuing up for water rations in the hot sun, you know, risking all kinds of things like violence, infection, whatever the threat is, when you could have just had loads of reserves at home? Next thing I'm going to say to do in the first 10 minutes is to put your phone on charge, all of the phone devices in the house, any other devices that are important and crucial, put them on charge immediately, because if the power grid's going to go down in your area, it might not have gone down yet, but it might be going down soon. If there's a risk of an EMP strike hitting your area after it's just hit another area, maybe protect those electronics as well within that first 10 minutes by putting them in a Faraday cage. You know, a lifeline is water, technology. We also need to think about security and securing the home. So within the first 10 minutes, I would say it's very important to secure your home. Make sure that you know there's no external threats that can affect your bubble. So fires, floods, civil unrest. Make sure that the threat of violence can be mitigated. Don't stand in front of doorways, especially ones that lead from the exterior to the interior of the home. People like to shoot through these, people like to kick these in, and it's just not a great place to be. Don't stand directly in front of windows. If you have to, you can potentially board up your windows with the interior doors within your home. This will take longer than 10 minutes, of course, but it's worth factoring in and planning within the first 10 minutes what you need to do. So we'll get back to that in a moment. Another thing you need to do is get your bug out bags ready. You need the bug out bags ready, and you need to get your travel documents, things like your passports, any documents that are important, anything that's valuable like jewellery, gold, silver, bartering items like alcohol. Get these into an area where they are all centralised so they can be grabbed quickly and you can go if you need to. This should remain the same throughout the whole of the situation, whether if it's a few hours or a few weeks. You know, if you're bugging in, make sure that everything is centralised that you need to survive. Make sure it's ready to go. Next, within the first 10 minutes, you should aim to move your car if you've got a car, and that's going to be your primary bug out vehicle. Maybe you've got multiple vehicles. Position them into positions where they can easily be driven straight out and onto the road and out of the way of danger. Don't leave it so you've got to reverse out of your driveway. That is a big mistake. You know, if people are trying to get to you, they can get to you pretty quickly that way. And if you need to get out because of some kind of natural disaster, any type of threat, you don't want to be messing around with putting it into reverse. Another thing I'd say to do is, if you can discreetly do it, put some provisions in the boot of the car if you've got a car. Put some water, put some 24 hours worth of rations, maybe some spare blankets, some spare clothes. Because if you have to get out the house in a hurry, you can get straight in the car and you've got the bare minimum that you need. And if you was able to grab your bug out stuff at the same time, even better. Also, within the first 10 minutes, I would recommend that actually within the first minute, if the electrics in the house are still working, to turn the TV up to full volume if it's giving some kind of alert, so that whilst you're moving around the house and filling the bathtub, putting your devices on charge, you know, sorting all the other things that you need to sort, you can listen to that update on the move instead of being fixated on the TV and wasting precious time. Another thing I'd recommend to do, if you've got time and it's safe, is to go to the shops, or send someone to the shops if it's safe, to get some of the bare essentials that you need that maybe were overlooked, things that you could use as bartering items as well. You have a very limited window of time before the panic buying sets in. If you think the panic buying has already set in and it's going to be dangerous to leave, then just bug straight in from there and start looking at the provisions you've got. Okay, next, within the first hour, you should realistically have reached out to your friends and family and see what their situation is. You know, if the phone lines are still working, if the telecoms systems are still in place, if the internet's still working, the Wi-Fi, then maybe, you know, the situation isn't as dire as you think. But then if the water source has been affected but the electronics are fine, then the situation might be a lot worse. So that's why we recommend filling the bathtub as quickly as possible. If it's got any sort of smell to it, or, you know, if it's making you feel unwell or something, then obviously, you know, if it doesn't look right, then maybe just get rid of that water. Anyway, back on topic. Within the first hour, you should contact your friends and family. You should have checked that your fridge and freezer is still working. If it's not, keep it shut. Make a list of everything that's in there and make meal plans. You need to be able to utilise the fresh food quickly and get rid of that as quickly as possible, you know, over the next couple of days to the next week, because as soon as that goes bad, it's done. Okay, the next thing you need to do, in my mind, is you need to pack things like cloves. You need to pack all of your dried cupboard food that lasts longer, shelf life wise. And you need to just pack these into sturdy bags so that if you need to bug out and you've got more time than, let's say, a few minutes, you can also start packing food. You can also start packing some clothes, some blankets, some bedding. These are all items that, if they'll fit into your bug out vehicle, are worth taking. So just bear that in mind. But obviously, if you've only got a few minutes, go straight to your bug out bag. Next thing I would say to do is to make a plan. Look at the situation, be realistic with yourself and with your group. Look at your limitations, look at your strengths and your weaknesses. Look at the risks that you face. And now you need to plan, you need to think, okay, what are we going to do? What is everybody's role within this group? You know, who is going to be the best person to secure the home? Who's going to be the best person to fix things that are broken? Who's the best person to provide first aid or medical needs if that's required? So think about everybody's role within the group. Even children can have a role, even if it's just organising things or keeping a lookout or listening to the radio for updates. Create a designated safe space within the home. If something happens, you know, depend on the threat of violence, where is everybody going to go and what are the stations that they need to take up? You know, is someone going to be at the rear of the house and someone at the front, or are you going to group together in one safe space and hold the fort from there? Think about what you're going to do if there's a fire. Don't be reliant on the emergency services. This is another thing that I want to say. You know, within the first hour, try and gather everything ready to be able to leave, but then within the next 72 hours, you know, you want to be making sure that you have secured the home. So what I said earlier about boarding up the windows, if that's a necessary thing, you can quite easily take the interior doors off. Make sure you've got hand tools to do this. Easiest trick to do right now is to get a screwdriver that fits the hinges on the door so that you don't have to rely on power tools. Get some hammers and nails, and then you could secure the outside of your building with the interior doors that are, that aren't really as necessary inside. Windows can be boarded up in that way. I'd recommend having sandbags as well, just in general, because they're great for flood defence, they're great as ballistic protection against firearms and explosions. They're also good for nuclear protection against radiation. So putting sandbags in windows and putting sandbag fortifications inside, it sounds extreme, but it's not as extreme as you think, when it could be your last line of defence and it could actually keep you alive. Another thing I'd say is if you've got fire extinguishers, make them accessible. If you don't have fire extinguishers, take some sodium bicarbonate solution, or even just some sodium bicarbonate powder, cover it with cling film and have it ready in the areas where you cook and start fires maybe. Because if there's a fire, that solution is going to be much more effective than just putting water on it. Another thing, guys, if you're bugging in, is medicine. What are you going to do when someone becomes sick and you don't have the means to go to a pharmacy for whatever reason? Maybe the pharmacists are striking, maybe there's logistical issues, maybe there's a major disaster. I don't know what could happen, but this can happen in your lifetime in your area. So learn to utilise the spices that are in your cupboard. Oregano, thyme, basil, cinnamon, garlic, honey. Learn to utilise these things to better treat ailments, and also keep a stock of over-the-counter medicines, prescription drugs, things like that. But for common ailments, for treating an infected cut, you could use honey. For dealing with a cold and flu, you could use ginger or cinnamon, oregano. So just bear in mind that that's also a thing that you should start preparing for as well. The spices in your cupboard are definitely a useful asset for when pharmacies aren't going to be open and you're bugged in and you can't leave. Another thing I'll say, within 72 hours, you need to make sure that sanitation is key. So this takes a little bit of preparation beforehand if you can. If you haven't prepared for this, then you could take a towel or flannels and cut them into strips if it's a towel, so that you've got rags that can be used to clean your body with, or your family's bodies with. You just dip the four corners in the water and you can use that on different parts of the body. A wet flannel is better than nothing. If you do have time to prepare, I would say that you should have dry wash that you would use for like camping and festivals. You should have baby wipes. You should have sealable bags, so that if you are doing your toileting business, you can seal that up. Sodium bicarbonate is great as well for that, because you can sprinkle that in there with it, seal it up, put it in a bag in a designated area in the garden or something, or outside, and leave it there, preferably out of the sun. If you've just filled your bathtubs and your sinks, you don't want to be using that water for washing. If it's a long-term situation, you want to keep that water for drinking. If you've got 130 litres in the bath, that will probably last under normal conditions with water rationing. It'll probably last 2 people. You've got to halve that essentially, and then you've got to halve it again. So you need roughly 2 litres of water a day to be healthy, I would say. So you've then got 2 people. So I've got 2 people in my household. I now have to cut down 130 litres to a quarter of what it was, and that's the amount of days that I've got. So 25, 15, 7.5. I've basically got a little over a month's worth of water at 2 litres of water a day. That's not factoring in cooking and washing myself and whatnot. So you've really got to think about this, guys. Water is critical for your survival. So another thing when you're conserving water, guys, is that potentially you need to look at not using water to wash up your dishes and things like that. So if you've got tin foil or aluminium foil, whatever it's called, or you've got saran wrap, cling film, you can cover your plates with that, or your bowls, and then use them, peel that off, put it into a bag, seal it, get rid of it, and then you didn't have to wash up as much as what you did. Also, make sure that you've got cleaning supplies that don't require a lot of water. So, antibacterial wipes that you can use on surfaces, on the floors, etc. Things like this are very, very useful when you're trying to conserve water, so just bear that in mind. Let's say that you have filled your bathtubs and your sinks and you didn't need to do that in the first place, because now there's been a news update and they're saying, look, don't worry, like, it's all under control, yada yada yada. Even though we've heard all that before, and it doesn't necessarily mean that. Just bear in mind that you can just take that water and use it for something else. You could fill some bottles up with it and keep it as storage for later on. You could essentially take a cold bath or something, I don't know. You could do your dishes, but I would rather take the chance of wasting some water than not having any water or enough water when the shit hits the fan. So preparation is key, guys. If you can prepare, let's just sum it all up. If you can prepare with, I would say, at least 15 gallons of water per person, in gallon bottles, that's great. Make sure that you've got some means of measuring the water as well. So if you're using the bathtub, let's say, you want to be able to measure what you're taking out. You also need to be able to filter that water, because it's probably going to go stagnant or stale. Covering the water over is also a good idea, but filtering it and being able to boil it or treat it is also a great thing to be able to do. Yeah, realistically, guys, the chance that a situation like this is going to occur in our lifetimes is probably higher than ever. There's more natural disasters than ever. There's more pandemics on the horizon. There's the risk of war, famine. There's all kinds of things that are going on in the world. Open your eyes and you'll see. There's so many factors that are trying to kill us, and there's so many people that are not as prepared as they should be. So just bear all this in mind. These are just a few ideas that I'm giving. Look at your general situation and think, if I had to fortify my home right now for a long haul stay to keep, the craziness outside from getting in, how would I do that? Fortifying the home is a good idea. Not letting people know that you've got preparations in place, even if, you fill in the bathtub and whatnot. Don't tell people, because when they're desperate, they'll come and take yours. If you're close with your neighbours, maybe you should, quickly knock on their door and say to them, look, it might be an idea to fill your bathtub and your sinks and as many containers as possible, and to charge your phones, and just grab essential items and be ready. This is just a little bit of friendly advice that you could give to someone, but bear in mind that if they don't do that because they think you're crazy, and then you did do that, and then all of a sudden they don't have enough, what are they going to do? Whose door are they knocking on? So just, it's up to you whether if you want to be part of a community or you want to go lone wolf with it, but what I would say is that desperate people do crazy things, so just bear that in mind. Anyway, that was a lot of content, really, a lot of ideas that I've thrown at you. I definitely think that people can always be more prepared. The more preparations you make now, the better off you're going to be. So make sure that you've got your bug out bags ready, because bugging out is one thing, but where are you bugging out to? Okay, so generally speaking, you're going to be bugging in for a while and then you're going to be going. And I would say that 72 hours is a good sort of time scale to decide on that, because any longer than 72 hours, and if it's martial law or severe sort of armed conflict or something like that, you need to get out as quickly as you can. But would you just, if I said to you that the next pandemic's coming tomorrow, would you just grab all your things and bug out? You probably wouldn't, because you don't know the severity of the situation, you don't know where's safe. You don't know if it's, actually serious or not, and if it actually warrants bugging out. Are you going to give up your job, your home, your livelihood, your kids going to school, all those sorts of things for that? It's worth thinking about, guys. Think about where you live as well. What risk factors are present? Are you in an urban area? Are you in a rural area where it's hard to get help if you need it? Etc, etc. So pre-planning and giving it some forethought gives you a much better advantage. Obviously, you know, just think about the first 10 minutes, the first hour and the first 72 hours, and you know, you should be much better off in general than most other people who haven't thought about this. Anyway, let me know in the comments what you think. It's a super interesting topic in my mind, and maybe I've missed something out. Maybe you guys have got something interesting that I can add to my sort of preparations. Anyway, thanks for watching, and yeah, please do like and subscribe. It helps the channel to grow. There's more content like this coming. You know, there's a broad spectrum of things that I like to put out into the channel, so check the channel out as well. There's a whole host of skills that maybe you haven't even thought about for your own preparations. Anyway, thanks for watching, and until next time.